It's here. We are redefining what it means to sit at the girls' table.
Hi everyone. Today on the Girls Table, I have a special guest, Michelle Okere. Michelle is the CEO of Compassion House Foundation, which is a non-for-profit dedicated to supporting women that need accommodations and support while receiving their cancer care. She is a CFRE, a certified fundraising executive, and a Forbes 40 under 40. Michelle has such an interesting story about growing up and how she became the person that she is today. And I'm so excited to share that story on the Girls Table. Michelle, stoked to have you on. If you could just start off, if you could give a little background about yourself.
Awesome, thanks. I'm super excited to be on today. Yeah, you covered a lot of it. Obviously, I work in the not-for-profit sector. I have my entire career. I absolutely love it. And I think community is probably going to be a major topic that we talk about today. So that's very much core to who I am and one of my passions. I am joining you from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So the Great White North. Fortunately, it's summer, so I actually have a tan right now, which is very exciting. And yeah, just very excited to be here.
You're definitely tanner than me. I'm kind of jealous, but so let's start off. Growing up, was there anybody that you really looked up to for inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. I had an older sister who was 9 years older than me. So she acted both as, an older sister and a role model, but oftentimes kind of took the parent role as well, just because we did have quite challenging family circumstances. And so I really did look up to her a lot. And I was very fortunate that she allowed me to be the tag along for a lot of things growing up. And then I think just over and above that, I was very fortunate to play sports all growing up. And so I had some really amazing coaches, especially around fastball, for really an extended period of time that I had the same coaches that really invested in me. And they were friends' parents as well. And so I got to do, extended family trips and things like that with them. And so I was just really, really fortunate to have people around me that invested in me, seeing the circumstances that I had at home and the potential that I had as well.
Yep. And also, did you say fastball?
Yeah.
What is that?
So baseball. So women's, the underhand.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, ladies baseball.
Yep. And I want to touch, I know you mentioned a little bit about your background and your family. So could you touch a little bit more on what your life was like growing up?
Yeah, you bet. So my parents were kind of on and off. My mom and dad have three of us together. My older sister is from a previous relationship. My mom actually got pregnant in high school and had my sister. So, my parents' relationship was tumultuous. There was a variety of issues, infidelity, alcohol abuse, things like that. And, ultimately they ended up splitting up. I was about 5. So my younger sister had just been born. So she was a baby, and all of a sudden my mom's a single mom with 4 kids, and that's certainly challenging. We moved to a small town where my mom had grown up or close by. And it just kind of always felt like we were the oddballs out. My mom really struggled financially, having to support the 4 of us. And it's hard to, get a full-time job when you have those young ones at home and not a lot of support around. And so we were off and on social assistance, moved around a lot. And a lot of how I grew up, what we had or didn't have often depended on who my mom was dating at the time. And so we dealt with food insecurity and housing instability and a variety of other things. And it often was kind of feast or famine. So if she had a boyfriend or someone around who maybe made a little bit of money, all of a sudden we had everything and access to a variety of things, but then it could drop off very quickly. So that was really challenging. In addition to that, my mom struggled with, some mental health related issues and, alcohol abuse. And so we never really knew what to expect. And then obviously all through that time, my dad was living across the province and we were kind of going back and forth between the 2 houses. So it was a bit complicated for sure growing up.
And you mentioned that you moved around a lot. So how many houses were you actually in growing up?
So we actually lived in a really small town after my parents divorced. So about 400 people. And during my time there, through elementary school and junior high, we lived in 4 different houses. in a very, very small town. My dad moved around quite a bit because he was an RCMP officer, and so he was often stationed in rural and remote communities on reserve. My dad's Cree, so that's, I guess, for your American audience, Native American. And so he was often placed on reserve because they wanted to have First Nations or Indigenous folks policing their own. And so that meant he moved around quite a bit as well. And so definitely some instability there. My mom actually moved away when I was 14, really unexpectedly. We were visiting my dad for the summer, and she'd gone to Mexico, and she met a guy, and she called actually the day before I was supposed to start high school and said, "You're starting school at your dad's. I'm not coming home." And it was a shock, because despite the fact that there had been quite a bit of instability in our lives, we had lived in that same small town for quite some time. And so I had at least there a sense of community. And I was excited to start grade 10 in high school with all of my friends I'd grown up with. And now all of a sudden it was this shock of not only are you not doing that, your mom's no longer in your life. I'm not coming home. I'm, an entire continent away. So that was probably really quite challenging. And that move from having at least some sense of stability in community to just being plopped down into a new city, in a new circumstance with my dad and his brand new wife, who were certainly not expecting to have 3 kids in the house. It was definitely very challenging, and I think marked my high school experience, because I wasn't really ready to accept that. It was quite a traumatic event for me, and I didn't really want to believe that it was true. And so I didn't really invest in making friends and being a part of the community, in trusting that this was what my life was going to be. I think I thought eventually she's going to come back and I'm going to move back to Ocala and everything's going to be fine. And it just never happened that way, which I feel really bad about, because I think my high school experience is my own fault. I really kept to myself. I focused on education and reading and all of those types of things, which ultimately ended up being positive because I was able to, get into education and be the first person in my family to go to university and to better myself. But it also meant that I missed out on a lot of those kind of childhood and adolescent experiences that were probably really important, and that I paid the price for down the road.
And how far away was from where your mom was to now your dad, where you're just moving in high school?
About 600 kilometers. So in miles, I don't know, 350, 400 miles probably.
Yep. And honestly, that was really hard. Did you try talking to your mom, being like, "Hey, Mom, I want to go to high school where I've been growing up for years," or was it just kind of no discussion, she met a guy and you're just going to have to make this work?
Pretty much, yep. It was a long distance call from Mexico. Very, very unexpected. I think it took us all by surprise, and then it was just kind of trying to come to terms with that. I mean, I certainly tried different angles. I had, fortunately, like I said, those friends' parents and coaches who I'd been involved with for a long time who were willing to take me in. But my dad certainly wasn't having that. He was technically available, and the idea of his daughter staying with strangers was not something that he was too excited about the idea of. So understandable, but I think it's definitely one of those things that stuck with me and that I've had to work through in my adult life when it comes to dealing with issues of, abandonment and feeling like the things that happen to you are somehow deserved, right? That, it's definitely been challenging, but again, fortunately, I was very lucky to have, even there, a sense of support within the school. I had teachers that really believed in me and people who invested in me, and was luckily able to, graduate with honors and get scholarships and have the opportunity to go to university and start working towards a better life.
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit about education. So was reading and education your outlet to kind of get out this anger, this grief of not being able to go back to your high school? Or was it, I know you mentioned fastball, what did you do to really kind of get out this feeling that you had during this process?
Yeah, I definitely, I nerded out with books. My husband now laughs at me, but I founded our book club in high school, which when you're new to a school already and you're not really investing in making friends, starting a book club is not actually helping you out at all. Yeah, so me and my librarian spent a lot of time together. But I definitely dove right into books, and I really liked the idea of like being able to find yourself in different realities and following those stories. And I remember growing up and like reading till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning that I couldn't put a book down. And I think that that was really important to me, but so was sport. I was lucky to be able to play fastball through high school as well. And there, at least I had, again, a team, a sense of community, of belonging. And, you know, even when I was younger, when we couldn't afford it, I knew there were different ways. And so being able to tap into community agencies like a kids sport that would cover my fees and my equipment and things like that was so important. And it's really been one of those things that as I've become an adult and had the opportunity to give back, I've really invested in myself as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think those outlets are probably the best type of outlets given your situation, like sports and reading. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And for those people who haven't gone through this, and you mentioned those agencies where you were able to do it with sports, but could you touch a little bit on like how you utilize them, how you went about this, and how you were able to really get help to do the things that you want to do at such a young age?
Yeah, you know what? Again, it really comes down to me being fortunate to have adults in my life that were willing to help me navigate that, because I would say it's not super easy, unfortunately, and I don't know what the experience is where you are, but there are a ton of supports available, a lot of community agencies, but understanding how to navigate systems, especially when you're coming from a toxic home environment, or you don't have somebody that can walk you through that, can be very challenging. So I think that's one of the things, as I began my work in the not-for-profit sector, that I've recognized in the need for agencies to better work together and to make it a lot more accessible for folks who are trying to navigate that, because it's our most vulnerable people in our community, and they have the least agency in being able to actually maneuver through those systems.
It's not something that's taught, like it's something that you have to figure out if you're in that process. And I think it's really hard, especially you and at that age, trying to figure out all these things that you want to do, but how do you go about them and how are you able to do them? You're in a new place, a new city. And when you were growing up, did you have a goal of what you wanted to be? Like when people would come up to you, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would be your response usually?
Yeah, I had two. So, I mean, and honestly, it's so funny because I grew up in a really small town. So you see certain professions, right? Like you see teachers and doctors and firefighters and policemen and things like that. And you also see what you see on TV. And I always wanted to be a lawyer. I just thought like to be in a courtroom and to be fighting for justice and doing the right things, that was something that really I found quite interesting. It was that or a journalist. And that's actually what I started university working towards, was journalism. I liked the idea of getting to know people and tell their stories. And again, just that idea of fair reporting, of being able to tell people's stories and really do them justice was really important to me. I ended up moving away from that. I had moved actually to a city that had a great journalism school, and then I got there and I decided it probably wasn't for me once I got to better understand it. And so I kind of fell backwards into a political science degree, which is very funny, but I kind of did a double major in political science and history because I found myself very fascinated in how it all worked together, like understanding, how do we end up in a world war? How do we, how are decisions made that impact everyday people? And what can we do to learn from our history to ensure that we don't repeat those same mistakes? And I also saw that, our elected officials are the ones that are making decisions that impact people like me when I was growing up. And so I really wanted to learn how I could better influence and navigate those systems.
Wow, that's really interesting. I also love your reasoning for wanting to be a lawyer. My reasoning was, at one point, I wanted to be a lawyer. I'm like, well, I love arguing. I love being right and like negotiating. You know what? I want to be a lawyer. And it was like, for years, my parents are like, you're going to become a lawyer, because I would always have to be right. I'm like, I don't think that's the best reason to pick a career looking back. And also, given all your circumstances, you went to college. You were the first one in your family. So did you always want to go to college? And did your family kind of always paint a picture being like, hey, do whatever it takes to go to college? Or was this just something that you always wanted for yourself?
I mean, it was always something that I wanted for myself. Like there was never a question about it. I remember being like 6 years old, like had always planned on on going to college. I always imagined myself as a career woman. If someone would have asked me at any point, like, where do you see yourself? Like in a big city, in a skyrise apartment and wearing a suit, right? Like, it's so funny because my younger sister and I talk about it a lot now, because I remember I was a little over the top on the feminist stuff when I was quite young, but like probably not in the best way, like very second wave feminism, not third wave. And so I remember asking my little sister what she wanted to be when she grew up. And she was like 4 or 5, and she always carried around a little doll. And she was like, I want to be a mom. And I was like, what? No, that can't be what you, like, I was devastated by this. But because to me, again, I had seen my mom just be in this like very dependent type of lifestyle where, again, so much of how we grew up depended on who she was with at any given time. And I just thought, I want to be independent. Like, I cannot ever find myself in that circumstance. And I want to be financially independent before I'm with anyone else. I want to be able to take care of myself. And so, yeah, it was kind of always in the plan for me, but not something that anyone ever put pressure on me to do, because it wasn't something that everyone in our family did. And so I would actually say, if anything, there was probably more limiting beliefs in what I could do, despite the fact that I always got good grades and things like that. There was this expectation that I was going to follow in my mom's footsteps. I remember there were extended family that said I was going to be 16, barefoot and pregnant. And I really fought that narrative. Like, I never wanted to be that. And so if anything, I really went the other way of what the expectations were of me.
It's crazy because I think growing up, you look at your parents as they're supposed to be these role models where you're like, I want to be like them. I want to be like them. And then you get older and you're like, wait, I don't like that. I don't want to do this. And like what you said about being a feminist growing up, it's my mom never worked and my dad always worked. And really, like, I felt like there's a weird power dynamic that's never talked about when, like, only the man's bringing in the money and the mom's not, or obviously vice versa, but usually, majority of the time, the woman's not working and taking care of the kids. And it's like you have to rely on the man to bring in money. My mom would always, like, clean up the house, have dinner ready, do this. And I saw that and I was like, I always need a job. Like, I never want to rely on somebody else. Like, I'm not meant to be a maid for somebody else, just be there when they want things and when they're home. And so it's just interesting to think back about what you take from your parents, and you're supposed to look at them as these great role models. And I do, like, I love my parents, but there's also this part where it's like, it makes you who you are today because you also see the things that you don't want in life. And do you remember the day that you officially got into college and realized, like, wow, like, you're about to go there and be the first one in your family?
Honestly, I don't. Like, I applied to a few places. I think I got in everywhere. It was just deciding where I was going to go. Like, I never worried I wasn't going to be able to get into college. Like, I got very, very good marks. Like, I was a 95 plus student in everything but maybe math. And so I never really worried about that. I was worried about the financial side of things, like how I was going to be able to pay for it. If I was going to be able to get enough scholarships, could I get a loan? What did that look like? Again, navigating systems I wasn't familiar with. Getting a place to stay and who was I going to live with when I was moving out. But there was more excitement about getting out of the circumstances that I was in. Despite the fact that financially things were a little bit better with my dad, it was, he was an RCMP officer. He struggled with PTSD. He definitely abused alcohol. We dealt with violence in our house quite frequently. And it didn't feel like a safe home environment. And so having that opportunity to get out and to start anew and to have agency in my life was just incredibly important to me. And so it was that excitement of, I'm 17 and I'm getting out. I'm getting to start something new, get a job, be financially dependent, work towards something better, and just finally having that freedom.
Mm-hmm. Like being able to just really pave your own path. And did your mom ever come back from Mexico when you were possibly able to move in with her and talk to her again? Or was it just more you stuck it with your dad now that you already started high school there?
Yeah, so funny enough, my mom came back actually right before I graduated high school, like right before. And I was like, we hadn't talked in 3 years.
Wow.
So it was a very uncomfortable situation. She came back and she moved to the city that I lived with my dad. And shortly thereafter, my brother and sister moved in with her when I moved to college, which made sense because, again, it wasn't the safest situation with my dad, but it wasn't a great situation with my mom either. But I think that felt easier for them. And so, yeah, while I was in university, I remember like taking my younger sister back to school shopping because my mom couldn't afford to. And, really feeling the guilt that I had gotten away from the circumstances, but I had a younger brother and sister who were now stuck in them as well. And my younger sister's 5 years younger than me. My younger brother's 3.5. So it was tough. They had some time before they were going to be in that situation. So I felt a real sense of responsibility to take care of them, despite the fact that my relationship with my mom wasn't good. I remember actually giving her my car my first year of university because she didn't have a form of transportation. She'd just come back from Mexico, and they weren't living in the best neighborhood, and I couldn't have my brother and sister in that situation where they were walking in a place that it wasn't safe. So yeah, I think I had to be the parent or the caregiver in those situations and take care of other people a lot more than someone at that age probably should have. But at the same time, it kind of forced me to, in a lot of ways, get my shit together early, right? Like I wasn't having the same college experience as a lot of other people. I wasn't going out and partying. It was actually funny. I was reminiscing about it with my husband the other day that the first time I went out to the college bar was my 5th year of university, like my final year. And
Wow.
he's like, he was a college athlete. So he was like, we had very different experiences. But I had to, like, I worked 40 to 50 hours a week. I managed a store, so I got leadership experience quite early, and I had to help my family out and get through that. My younger sister actually was out. My brother dropped out of high school just because of the circumstances. My younger sister was out on her own at 16. So she needed a lot of support just due to the circumstances. And I tried to be a good role model and supporter for her and hopefully help pave the way for her to be the next one in our family to go to university.
And did she end up going to university as well?
She did. She started, and then it ended up not being the best fit for her at the time. But she actually just recently moved to the city that I'm in, and she lives not too far from me, and she's doing really well, which is good. And I feel like there's a lot of respect and understanding and appreciation for what I did for her during that time. And we have a really great relationship now, despite a bit of an age gap. So it's been nice to see her grow up and thrive and be able to give back as well. And she's involved in the not-for-profit sector as well, working in youth care. So it's a good fit given the circumstances.
Well, I love that both of you guys are non-for-profit too. And what was the first job that you ever had, and how old were you?
Oh gosh, Dairy Queen. Yeah, I can.
Love that. I worked at Friendly's, so.
I can whip up a blizzard and hold it upside down for you. And I think I was 14. It was right when I moved to North Battleford. So like 14, 15. And I worked there all through high school. So yeah, not a super glamorous job. I often ended up you had like ice cream all over yourself.
Yeah, I had the Friendly's ice cream, if you had any of those by you, with like, they have like weird faces on them. I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like early on, babysitting and things like that, but yeah, it's kind of just feels like I've been working multiple jobs my whole life. But it's been good, and I think you learn a lot from it. Again, my husband and I get in these arguments all the time. He's like, if we had kids, he's like, I would never want them to have to work. And I'm like, through high school and university, I'm like, yeah, but like, you do learn some things. I mean, I don't think anyone should have to work as much as I did, but I think learning to manage time and your schedule and how to act professionally and to work with other people, like there's some really good pieces that you get from that, even financial management, like to actually have to deal with some money coming in and how do you spend that money and responsibly and even just appreciating the things you're able to do for yourself that much more because it's money you earned.
Oh, 100%. I think it's actually important for kids to have a job. And then you obviously went to college, you got in, you went, so how did you afford it? Like, what was your first step into really getting either like scholarships, loans, to like working 40, 50 hours a week at a job?
Yeah, so I worked a lot through high school, probably more than most high school kids, to start saving, because I knew that was something I was going to be doing. And then over that summer too, I had 2 jobs all summer, worked like crazy, saved up. And then I also had to take out like a credit line, unfortunately, because while my circumstances were that, growing up with my mom, I didn't have a lot of financial support. My dad had a better job. And so technically our family income, despite the fact that he wasn't going to help me financially with school, was too much that I actually couldn't get a student loan that first year. So I had to take a line of credit out, which of course is higher interest in a different circumstance. And then after I'd been out for a year, and actually my dad and I ended our relationship shortly after I moved out, I was able to kind of claim independence and get a student loan from there. Thank God, because I don't think I could have gotten through 5 years of university on a $10,000 line of credit.
Oh my God. You went in state though, right? Or did you go out of state as well?
So
it's crazy though, like how much student loans are. Like that's a whole different story. It's like, it is crazy. Are you still paying them off, or are you all paid off now? And
I am super fortunate that I paid them off when I was 27. So I got out of school. It was supposed to take 11 years at like pretty substantial monthly payments. But I was working full time in like a salary job, and then I was bartending on the weekends, and I just used my tips. Like I paid it off as quickly as I could. I didn't love bartending, but I knew it was kind of like getting me there that much quicker. And I was quite debt averse just because I had seen what that had done to family. And so I was like, the quicker I can get this done and I can move on with my life, the better. And so maybe that money would have been better spent invested, or, the ROI there. But at the time it was just like, I don't want this over my head. I want it done.
I'm the same way. I'm like, pay it off. Like if I ever owe somebody money, I even have a Venmo, I'm like, gotta get it out. Like I hate owing people money. It was probably that same feeling where like, you're always taking out money, you're always taking out. I'd be the same way. I'm like, yeah, sure, I want to invest, but like, I gotta pay this off first.
Totally. Yeah. It just felt good. And it felt like such an accomplishment as well, because I had to do it on my own. So getting that final statement and saying that it had been paid off, it just felt like, again, that freedom and the light at the end of the tunnel of like, okay, I don't have like $600 a month coming out to the government anymore. So
yeah, which is crazy and like really adds up to, no matter what your initial salary is outside of college, like that's a lot of money. And you talk about this feeling of kind of wanting to get your household. You felt like guilty about your family still being back home. So do you remember a day when you first got out, you're at college, a feeling like this feeling of relief of finally being out and in a sense, free from kind of everybody else and just being able to do your own thing?
Oh man, like that first year of university was like so fun. I mean, I'm sure like that first little bit, it's not really about going to class. It's kind of more about just enjoying campus. And so being there and having that opportunity and being reunited with old friends as well. There were old friends from where I grew up who had come there for college as well. And so it just kind of felt like I was able to ease back into who I was. Like my personality came out a little bit more. I finally felt a bit more comfortable. And I started to really like find my way again. It took years, but it was really an incredible feeling, having what felt like freedom and agency for the first time in my life and not being beholden to whatever my family circumstance was.
Mm-hmm. And now looking back on your childhood, one thing you talk about is community, but what were the main things that you really took away from it?
Yeah, this one's interesting because I'd love to say that it was all really positive, but I think there was a lot of negative beliefs that I really had to unlearn. For me, the fact that I grew up feeling like love was conditional. Like I never experienced unconditional love. Everything came with strings attached to it. And, I also had to spend a lot of time hiding my feelings and hiding what was going on at home. And so I really struggled to understand how to express myself emotionally and how to be vulnerable and just even healthy ways to self-soothe. So I actually ended up struggling with an eating disorder in my early 20s because I didn't have the skills to deal with a lot of those things. So actually like 20 to 24, 25, I really, really struggled. And so it was just like it manifested in different ways for me. Mm-hmm. So I think the other one's like, for me, a really big one was this belief that I deserved my treatment. I kind of talked about that the circumstances that I dealt with at home, that somehow I had done something to deserve that. And I think that that's often in toxic home environments, a limiting belief that people have, because you're told that when you have an abusive parent, when you have people who are doing drugs or substance or alcohol abuse and things like that, there's always something you're doing that's made them violent or reactive. And so to learn how to be in a healthy relationship, or to understand that, I wasn't the one that deserved this. And I struggle with that still now, that somehow there's something along the way that I could have done better in a situation, whether it's work, with friends, and otherwise. And so I've really had to take time to work with a therapist and really unpack a lot of those things. And, I'm very fortunate that I've gotten to where I am at the time that I have, but a lot of the skills or the experience or the pieces that have made me very successful are also the things that cause me a lot of issues, right? I work really hard because I feel like I have to earn people's respect or their love or that everything is conditional. I feel like I have to take care of everyone around me and that I'm responsible for them, because that's what I learned when I was a child, right? I had to take care of my siblings and my parents and all those types of things. And I still put a lot of pressure on myself to do that, whether it's, people's happiness, their finances, their careers. And then when you end up in a leadership position, there's even more pressure on you to do that, right? And so I take that responsibility very seriously, but I also have to find that kind of healthy balance and reframe it a lot of the time. So understanding that, those beliefs came from needing to take care of myself in a toxic situation, and that I'm no longer in that. And so I'm now in a place where I can reframe that and say, I got through what I needed to get through, but now I'm in a healthy space and I have more control over my circumstances. So that's not the case anymore. I can actually be comfortable and vulnerable and trust in people. And I'm super fortunate. Like, I have an incredible support network around me, community. I have an amazing partner, but it's still taken time for me to get there. And I still struggle with it. I think that independent part of me really struggles with being vulnerable and allowing people to take care of me. And I think, again, that's probably a lot of the reason why I ended up in the space that I did, is this like need to take care of people, which on the one hand is wonderful. And I think it's good to have those positive intentions, but it also sometimes means not taking care of yourself.
I also love that, like, recently, at least in the past couple of years, like, more and more people talk about mental health. They talk about therapists, and I'm so happy that you shared your story, because I think it's so important. So I know you mentioned therapy a little, but is there anything else you did? Like, obviously you're still on your own journey. Everybody's still working towards whatever it is that's going on in their head, because I think so much goes on in your head no matter what it is. And so was there anything else that you did to really that's helped you get to kind of where you are today, and even helping you today?
Yeah. So when I struggled with my eating disorder, again, I knew there was a lot of underlying things there. Perfectionism, this like need for external validation, all of that. But I mean, there's also just the general like societal pressures to be beautiful and thin and pretty, like all of these different things as women, right? And so I really had to challenge some of those things. And one thing that was really helpful for me was I was always like active, but I got into lifting, like actually like weightlifting. I got into powerlifting. I started competing, and it really helped me like reframe. It became a very important mental health outlet for me, and like wellness space where I could just like go to the gym, throw around some weights for a couple of hours, not think about anything else that was going on, and leave just feeling like Superwoman. But at the same time, it helped me change the way I looked at my body, and understanding that it's so much more than how I look, but actually, what my body can do, and just to really take appreciation for that. Like, I don't think most people would see me walking down the street and think like, oh yeah, that girl can deadlift 350 pounds, right? But I can, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that there's a sense of confidence in myself that I can work towards something and better myself. And so, yeah, the gym has become like a really sacred place for me. But also just like, I love getting out to the mountains. I'm so fortunate to live in Alberta. We have the Rockies here. It's gorgeous. So to get out in nature, to do some hikes, I love, walking my dog, and again, just like throwing in a podcast and not thinking about everything else that's going on, meditating, obviously the importance of like good nutrition and sleep. I think a healthy lifestyle is just like so incredibly key to being high performing in all of the other areas of your life as well. And when you get on top of those things, the mental health side usually will come along with it. So I think those pieces have been really, really critical for me. And then the opportunity again to give back a little bit in that space, to share my story, and to work with young women and girls who are struggling with body image and self-esteem and some of those things as well.
Yeah, and I agree. Mental health, I think, is definitely a topic that needs discussion, but I think actually having a healthy lifestyle is really important. I only do Pilates, so I don't do weights, but even hearing that, I'm like, damn, I want to go hit the gym and go like pick up some weights. I'm like, yeah, I'm the like weakest person that you know, so awesome.
I've heard Pilates is very challenging, so
when you're in LA, I think we have to do it and go climb a mountain. Like,
okay,
done. So at age 29, you were named CEO. So once you got that role, do you feel like you made it and like you found your purpose for everything you've been working for?
It's such a hard question. You know what? I decided very early in my career when I got into the space, I'm literally my first job. I was like, I'm going to run one of these places. I saw what I felt to be, a lot of organizations that weren't professionally run, that didn't put their best face forward. The nonprofit sector, it struggles, right? Like, I think you can take more of an entrepreneurial or a business mindset to how you run these organizations. And that was more my way of thinking. And so I saw a huge opportunity there, and I said, like, that's what I'm going to do. And I was I'm so type A and so driven that I was like 22 or 23. And I started just reaching out on LinkedIn to everyone that was in that position, like CEOs, VPs, like whatever, across Canada. And just said like, hey, do you have 15 or 20 minutes for me to pick your brain? And I just reached out to them and asked them for advice. I was like, hey, you're where I want to be. I'm new in my career. Like, what do you think I should do? Like, give me the roadmap. And the craziest thing is every single person said yes. I didn't have a single person say no to me. And I had like the biggest nonprofits in the country that were taking time out of their day to give me advice. And I think that they really did help me to identify what my best path forward was. And that's very much a part of the reason that I got to where I was when I did. I mean, obviously I had a board that took a chance on me. I was 29. I didn't, I had good experience, but I had no CEO experience. I'd never reported to a board before. I was coming in to lead a team that had been through a lot. And then of course I got in, and 7 months later, a pandemic hit. So it was definitely not what I expected. So any bliss I had in coming into my role and thinking like, oh, I'm finally a CEO and I've made it, was quickly dispelled, and it was put into emergency response mode. And how am I going to get us through this and not have to lay off staff or close our doors or impact the women that we serve who are immunocompromised and at risk. But I was ready for the challenge, and I was really fortunate to have an incredible team. And I think the experience I've got over the last 2.5 years through that probably set me up for, whatever the next 30 years of my career look like, because I don't think most people in their first CEO role have to deal with those kind of tough decisions that really do impact people's lives. And so as hard as it was, we made it through. We actually made it through in a better financial position with more awareness of the work that we do, and hopefully set to expand, which is really exciting. But yeah, when I came in at 29, I was very naive. I think there was probably a lot more ego there about like the title and the salary and all of those pieces that come with being a CEO, and not a really firm understanding of the responsibility of leadership. And I learned that really quickly when the pandemic hit. And I think it's totally shifted the way that I look at leadership positions and the responsibility that you have when you bring in a team and you tell them that you're going to be there for them, you're going to accomplish all of these things, that you really do have to take that seriously, because you're talking about people's careers and their lives.
Yeah, and given that you were age 29, there's probably people reporting under you who are 20, 30 years more in their career. Did you ever have imposter syndrome when you're like, I shouldn't have been named it, like they made a mistake, I don't know if this should be me? Like, did that ever happen?
Less so with the organization. It was definitely a concern I had coming in because, the two people who reported to me initially when I came in were both, like you said, 20, 30 years older than me. I thought for sure they'd look at me and say, like, who the heck is this kid coming in here to tell us what to do? Not that I took that approach by any means, but there was definitely some concern of what was that working relationship going to be like, and what is it going to be with our stakeholders or with my board, who was, most of them nearing the end of their careers or recently retired and looking for experience or like board experience and a way to give back. But I was never made to feel that way, which I think was really incredible. I do remember one of my board members, our treasurer at the time, taking me out for coffee after a board meeting and saying, when you were named CEO, when they made the recommendation, the hiring committee, when they sent them the recommendation out to the board, they talked about all of your qualifications, all of your experience, and how incredible you were. And I thought, based on what they told us about you, that you were at least in your 40s, maybe in your 50s. Like, I thought you were a really experienced dynamic CEO. And then I met you and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this girl's young and she is dynamic and she is amazing. And I think she's going to be awesome for the organization. But they didn't set me up for failure in that way. Like, ever talking about my age or maybe lack of experience or anything like that. So I think that really helped. Just having people who were in those positions who really vouched for me. And I've been really fortunate ever since to be in a similar situation. Not that age never comes up. Of course, it always is something that will weasel its way in now and then. And but yeah, I've been very fortunate for people to look at more of what I bring to the table than how I look.
Yeah, and I feel like age is just a number, and like people in organizations, like they have such new ideas when they're young and they're ready to kind of put in the work. And I just think, like, exactly as probably you did, where you were just ready to get your hands dirty and really make a difference in the company. And obviously we talked a lot about your background today. So how did you learn how to be a good and successful leader?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of really positive role models or leaders growing up. And even the first couple of jobs I had out of university, I saw a lot of things that to me, I didn't want to be like. Fortunately, in my job before this, I had really incredible leadership, and I had a CEO who had been there for 25 years, had dedicated his life to the cause, and a second in command who had been there just as long. And so I learned a lot about structure and trust and giving people autonomy and just the types of things that I really valued at that organization that really helped me develop like my leadership style. But like I said, when I came in, I will be the first to admit it, I did not understand the responsibility of leadership. I was definitely more caught up in title and other things. And so I had to learn that. Like, I had to learn what my leadership style was and what different people required. And so I did a lot of reading, did a lot of professional development, coaching, mentorship, and just really learning to understand individual needs of my team members, because everyone's different. And I think that was one of the biggest shocks to me, because I'm someone who wants a lot of autonomy. I'm just kind of like, tell me what needs to get done and get out of my way. And when you talk about some of the age gap related stuff, generationally, that's actually not what like a generation above us or even the one above them, that's not their approach. That's not what they have learned or previous leaders have been like. And so it took a while for people to come around, for that trust to be developed on both sides, and for us to get to a really good place. But now I'm so fortunate. My team has grown exponentially since I started, and we have such an amazing group of people. And I feel so fortunate that they will provide me with feedback, because that's another really important key, is like, I don't have all the answers, and I actually need you to tell me. And I think sometimes it's hard when you're in a leadership position to trust that people are giving you real feedback, because there's a power dynamic there. And so even this year, like, I asked my board to do a 360 review. I was like, I asked for feedback, but I don't know if I'm not getting some of the constructive stuff that would be helpful for me to be a better leader. And they like made me cry. My team was like so amazing. But to me, it's like, you really need to invest in people. And that was something that was really important to me right away. Like, that shouldn't just be me that's getting professional development budget. Everyone should have that opportunity. Everyone should have the opportunity to understand where we're trying to go as an organization, how the work that they're doing feeds into our overall strategy, because we are a purpose-driven organization and they are excited about the work they're doing. So I want them to see the bigger picture. I wanted to ensure that I could help people like in the coaching side of things, that I could help them find the answers themselves and not constantly just be doing the work for them or taking over. So I think like good leaders create leaders. Mm-hmm. That is to me so important. And it's now at the point with my organization that I have enough leaders within my organization that I don't have to be involved in the day-to-day. I can actually focus on some of the high-level strategic stuff and the partnerships and the stuff where I'm really good, because they've been built up and they have the confidence to go and do that work internally. So I'm really fortunate to be in that position, but it's required a lot of work and professional development, and also just creating really good feedback loops. And the other thing is like holding myself accountable. I'm not perfect at all. I make mistakes all the time. And I think the biggest lesson for me is that as a leader, if you're going to hold other people accountable, you have to hold yourself accountable as well. And so I fuck up all the time. Like,
I think we all do.
all the time. But like, I've had leaders who, when they have messed up, they can't wait to throw somebody under the bus. Like, it's never their fault. And to me, I'm like, yeah, guys, I messed that one up. That's on me. I'm sorry. Like, let's figure out how we can fix that next time, how I can be more supportive, how I can ensure I don't miss that, whatever that looks like. And I think that creates a mutual respect as well. And when you hold yourself accountable as a leader, it really, it helps other people hold themselves and others accountable within the organization as well.
Yeah. And that was some great advice. I'm curious to know, what was the best advice you've ever received and who was it from?
Okay, this one's kind of funny, but this is what I have. My husband always says, kill him with success. He's not a kill him with kindness person. He is a absolutely kill him with success kind of guy. And he's an immigrant. He moved here from Nigeria when he was 8, and he has, a very similar background to me. And I think when people don't necessarily expect that much from you, or you've always been told you're never gonna go anywhere, you're never gonna be anything, the best revenge is really success. So that's what we do.
I love that. And then if you could sit next to anybody at the girls' table, who would it be?
This one's so hard. One person I have a ton of respect for, though, is Michelle Obama. I just think she is somebody who dealt with so much publicly that would break someone, and just to have the level of integrity coming through that, and to understand how to navigate that in a way that never compromised herself, I think is just, it's incredible. I don't know that I could do it. And so, yeah, that's one for sure. I'm sure there's dozens more. And I think I've been definitely in a space where I've been trying, much like you, to spend more time learning from other women, and really trying to focus on building those relationships, because I think sometimes we spend a lot of time competing with one another instead of building each other up. And I think that's really cool about what you're doing here with this podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Michelle, I just appreciate you coming on today and really sharing your story, because I think there's so much to take away from this and learn from you. And so I just really appreciate you coming on, being vulnerable and being very open about your past. And I'm so excited to see where you go, because I feel like you're going to be unstoppable. And I just want to ask, is there any last minute advice that you have for the people that are listening today?
I think the one thing I would say is just do what feels right to you. I've had to make some really difficult decisions lately, and I know that there's been judgment attached to whatever the end result of that is, but at the end of the day, you know what's right for you, and no one else has to walk in your shoes. So make the decision that feels good, and everyone else can just keep their opinions to themselves.
I love that. And for everybody who's listening, where can they follow you and continue to watch your journey?
Yeah, you bet. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Michelle0 Kere.
Love it. All right, Michelle, thank you so much for coming to the girls' table. You are awesome, and I am so excited to continue to watch you on your journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much.